If you want to become the best player in your 2v2 rank games, then this is the video for you, because by the end of it, you'll know some of the most common mistakes to avoid, and you'll know how to consistently be the most impactful player on the field. By using the information that I'm about to give you, I was nearly able to get GC3 a while ago, and definitely could have actually got it if I just used this information more consistently, which is exactly what you'll notice the pros doing in their games. So the key to becoming the best player in your games is this: maximizing your impact. And you can only actually do this if you fully understand roles. No bread.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
And there's only two roles, first man and second man. Seems pretty simple, right? First man's in front, second man's behind, but it's a bit more complicated than that. Many players don't have a clue how to actually play these roles, even if they think they do, including the people saying, it's always my teammate's fault and not mine. So if you're someone who has a hard time playing around certain teammates, then understanding when and how to actually play your role is going to allow you to carry, even if it means you have to sacrifice touching balls.
What did he say?
One last thing though, not everything that I'm about to talk about can be used in lower ranks, simply because you shouldn't expect your teammates to play their roles that well, but a lot of the information can still be used in your games. Let's first talk about the first man role on offense. As first man, your main goal on offense is not necessarily to score, but to break down the defense and make it easier for your team to eventually score. In 2v2, especially high level 2v2, you should think of defenses as double layered, with each layer being an opponent, of course. The higher in ranks you go, the lower chances you'll have to immediately get the ball past both layers as first man, because defenders will know how to play their roles better. That's why as first man, it's crucial to make the defense as uncomfortable as possible, and these are the ways that you can achieve this. Ideally, when you have full control of the ball, you're going to want to get the ball around the opponent first man while still keeping possession afterward. Fully committing into the ball, aka flipping into it or flicking it, will make it harder to keep possession afterward. But when you get to higher ranks like GC and above, players will start to get good at keeping possession for their team even after fully committing into the ball. If you do manage to get the ball past the first guy, now you give your team many options. You can try to score in the 1v1 or set up your teammate with some sort of pass. Now, let's say you don't have enough time to get the ball past the opponent first man because they're instantly challenging you. This is a situation where you could take a 50, but you don't actually want to win the 50 if the ball will most likely end up going closer to their second man, because your team will probably lose possession even if the ball is technically going closer to their net. Instead, if you lose the 50 towards your teammate or even throw in a fake challenge to make the opponent slam the ball away, then your teammate will get a free ball. Drive challenges are really good as well, because you can also get a demo on your opponent as they get a hit on the ball. Just make sure that you know where your teammate actually is first, otherwise it might be bad. Essentially, by quote-unquote losing the challenge in this situation, you're taking an opponent out of the play and giving your team more space and opportunity to work with. Now, if the opponent's second man is challenging you while you're first man on offense, then winning this challenge could be huge. But one of the most important things I'll say in this entire video is that you don't want to be overcommitting as first man and leaving your second man alone in a 1v1 or 1v2, especially if you don't trust them, because if you get scored on, you're at fault for the goal. Finally, if you're done making your play as first man and it's not too dangerous and on the way through your rotation, look to bump someone and or steal an opponent corner boost. Most of the time, it'll be better to bump their last man, but by doing these, you'll be slowly breaking down their defense without having to be on the ball. After that, get behind your teammate as quickly as possible, but try to stay in the play using small pads if your team is still on offense, rather than going all the way back for big boost. If you're below probably champ, I would advise against ball side rotation and potentially colliding into your teammate, and instead suggest rotating through the side opposite of where the ball is. Ball side rotation is really only okay if you're providing some value for your team, such as stealing boost from an opponent, getting a bump, or cutting in for your teammate who may not be in a great position to challenge. This kind of leads into the last thing I wanted to talk about for first man on offense, but if you notice your teammate is way too far back after you've made your play, then I would encourage you to stay close to the ball and challenge it again with that same goal of having your team still keep possession afterward. So that way the opponent doesn't have too much space to work with and your teammate can hopefully reposition better. But please do not cut back in all the time though if you don't know where your second man is, because this is what leads to a ton of double commits and easy goals for your opponents. If you find yourself right under the ball or in an awkward spot in general, I would suggest just rotating out at that point unless you really know what you're doing or the ball is literally about to go in your net, because when you're right under the ball, you have no vision of anything anything, and your hit most likely doesn't help your team. At that point, your teammate probably has a much better opportunity to do something useful with the ball. Alright, that was probably the longest section of this video, but now let's talk about second man on offense. Obviously, once you're done playing your role on offense as first man, you'll rotate into second man.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. And I didn't need to know that.
But even though you're on offense, as second man, you still always got to make sure the net is protected in some way because you're still that last layer of defense. Now, as second man, your positioning is the most important thing and can be pretty hard to master. You don't want to be pushed up too far forward because your net will be way more vulnerable, but you also don't want to be too far back because you'll miss out on a lot of opportunities to keep pressure and even score. How you should be positioned is usually going to differ between ranks, but as long as you understand how to read the play well by examining your opponents and the current speed of the ball, you'll get so much better at second man positioning over time as you play more matches. You typically should be waiting somewhere behind your teammate though, waiting for a 50 or some hit to come back to you. Otherwise, once your first man is starting to rotate out, that's where you transition from second to first man. Generally, waiting around half field when your teammate is pushed up super far will be good positioning in the lower ranks, but this is situational, which is why I say you should have a good read of the play in front of you if you want to be in the most optimal position. Most importantly, if the ball is right in front of the opponent's net and there's not a clear opening for you to score the ball, then don't go for the ball and play the long game instead. Because usually this is how many lower ranked players get scored on, because their first man won't even be ready to rotate back and it leaves their net wide open for a free counterattack. Now we're getting to maybe the most important sections of the video, which is defense, because most Rocket League players straight up do not know how to defend. So if you understand your role on defense, this alone could help you really climb the ranks. As usual, let's start off with the first man here. The term I'm going to use a lot here is forcing, which just means to force the opponent to do something with the ball when they have complete control of it. The more space and time you give your opponents, the harder it'll be to stop them and effectively use both your layers of defense. As first man, your main responsibility is to either transition your team from defense to offense or force so that way the opponent loses control and your team can potentially regain possession. It's important that you don't let your opponent keep full control after your challenge and leave your teammate in a 1v1 situation, because at that point there's nothing you can do. Fake challenges are a good way to force without committing, or you could lose a 50 towards your corner or teammate if you're confident they'll be where they need to be. If your teammate is low on boost or needs time to reposition better, then having the ball in your corner or keeping the ball close with 50s can be a good strategy to stall time for them. Now, if the opponent is air dribbling towards your net, you want to be going for the ball as first man, or at the very least getting a bump. At higher ranks like GC, you can also force the opponent to air dribble it high towards the backboard by challenging slightly lower, with the expectation that your teammate is already on the backboard ready to receive that ball. Backwall defense becomes really important as you climb the ranks, as players become more consistent with double taps and you don't want to give them those easy setups. You obviously don't want to go too high in your challenges, otherwise the opponent can air dribble towards the ground and give themselves many more options to score when they're back on the ground with full control of the ball. Finally, if there's a possible situation on defense where your last man is too far back to go for a challenge while you're rotating back, then you do want to be cutting into the play for them to make sure you're keeping that two-layer defense. One more important thing is that if you're behind every player on the field and your teammate's left in that 1v2, then definitely try to look for bumps or demos on one of the opponent sets in front of you. At the end of the day, you're trying to just make an impact on the game, even in situations where it might not seem like you can. But there will still be situations where you're too far out of the play to cut back in, and in those cases you want to assess why you couldn't get back on defense in time and what led to you being out of the play for too long. Finally, the most important section of the video in my opinion is defense as second man, and one of the most crucial things I can say here is that if your first man is completely gone, you want to stall as much time as possible for them to get back. If there's absolutely no way they can get back in time before a shot, then you need to be able to understand this first of all, and then make a play on the ball when it's the right time. There are so many times in literally every rank where the second man gets super impatient and just rushes the ball when their first man is still in Narnia trying to rotate back, and the net is wide open for an easy goal. It's also important to note that your teammate doesn't have to already be behind you first for you to challenge the ball as the new first man. If you know that by the time you challenge the ball your teammate will be in position as second man, then you don't have to wait longer than you should. The best way to stall for your teammate is by utilizing shadow defense, which is where your back is facing the player with the ball and you're mimicking their movement so that you can cover the net in front of you while also being able to challenge if they lose control or you find a good opportunity to challenge. A lot of players will utilize fake challenges along with this by fake boosting towards the ball and also hiding behind the ball. Knowing how much distance you should have between yourself and the opponent when shadowing is pretty tough to get down, but playing 1v1 will allow you to master this the fastest because you're always the last man on your team. To go along with shadowing, you should also be comfortable at backward saves and being able to still clear the ball where you want it to go, such as the corner, because it's the safest spot on defense. And speaking of corners, sometimes it's also a really good strategy to bait your opponent to take the ball into your corner when you shadow by keeping yourself between the net and the opponent if they're by the side wall. Sometimes you can even take the ball back into your corner yourself if you need to stall time for your team to get boost and reposition. Generally in lower ranks, back post rotation, meaning rotating to the post furthest away from the ball, is good in almost any situation for the second man because the whole net is in front of you, making it easy to save many shots, or it allows you to go onto the backboard if the ball is going there. It's also just easier to go faster forward and backwards, so being back post ensures that you don't have to go backward to get a save. Once you get to around champ or GC, that's where it's not as useful all the time and you should instead base it on the current situation. Now, for any situation in twos where you for sure know you can beat your opponent to the ball and benefit your team, even if you're second man on defense, then by all means go for it. Sometimes there will be situations where you find both opponents pushed up too far and you can hit it past both of them. You might need to also take those risks if your team is down in goals with very little time left as well. By the way, I made another video that goes hand in hand with this one called 10 essential Rocket League tips in just 10 minutes. So to maximize everything that I talked about in this video, I would highly recommend watching that. But before you do that, if you guys found this video helpful, I would really appreciate if you could just hit that like button and leave a comment letting me know if it helped as well. If you're interested in more educational content like this, be sure to subscribe because I plan on posting more videos to help you guys get better at Rocket League. Anyways, the video I was just talking about is popping up on the screen right now, so go watch that if you want to be better in your twos games or Rocket League in general.